Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Salute to Industry. I love this interview here because I've got a chance to not talk to a corporation, but oftentimes we want to plug resources in the community. We have a recent partnership with the Special Operations Transition Foundation, which is a big mouthful. They go by SOTF. And let's talk and welcome to Tommy Stoner of the Special Operations Transition Foundation. Welcome, Tommy. You guys are serving the military's pro athletes, but before we break that down, let's congratulate you on your 29-year career and what you've gone through with the Rangers, Special Forces, Truist, and then congratulations on your recent move into the foundation as of 2020.
Awesome, Don. Thanks. One thing I do got to correct you on, it's Special Operators Transition Foundation.
Oh. Sorry about that. Well, let's jump into it. You guys have been active since 2013 and just growing year over year over year. And let's first start out. Tell me about the Special Operations, the foundation. Tell me about the foundation itself, how it got started.
Yeah, so as you said, we started out in 2013, and really how it came about was some of the members from SEAL Team 6 had just returned from the Asadabad mission to go after bin Laden, and they had the opportunity to meet some business leaders from industry, and in having talks with these operators, a lot of these leaders are really shocked that these operators really didn't see a path for themselves outside the military. And you're talking about these highly capable, clearly type A triple plus performers, that incredibly intelligent, and a lot of them had just as incredible educational backgrounds as well, and they just didn't see how they could fit on the outside. Like they only saw themselves continue to be operators where they're contractors in government services. So they united to come together and build this organization to help provide the transition assistance for operators to leave their military career and go into whatever their next phase of life was, which is a professional career kind of outside the government or contract work. And again, that started in 2013. That's when the organization incorporated originally as Your Grateful Nation. And in 2014 is when the first operators came through. And there were four the first year, there were 7 the next year. And it's just incrementally increased. And before it was, one person with a cell phone with a team around them. And now it's become a true organization with lots of supporters. We changed our name in 2020 really to put our mission in our title. So that's when we went from Your Grateful Nation to Special Operators Transition Foundation. So there's lots out there have heard of this, before as YGN. And our trajectory is great. It's really on track this year to probably service 130 operators transitioning out. And we've had an incredible placement rate this year, a lot of it kind of exiting the back end of COVID, so some of those delayed transitions. But the reputation of the organization is pretty strong out there, a lot of word of mouth referrals, and a lot of folks making that transition as kind of the military starts to come down as well. And so overall, it's been really great. And again, we're on a great trajectory as an organization.
Which is part of what we're doing here is trying to spread the word, get the messages out to the communities. And because it's really a niche audience that you serve, right? So hopefully we can do some good and get that word out there. But wow, you guys are really going to have a good level up. I mean, you've done over a few hundred people have transitioned through the program to jump to 130 as of last year. That's going to be quite a growth for you guys.
It is, and like any organization, when you scale like that, you want to make sure that you're providing the same quality. That's our mission. We want to make sure that we provide not only the same quality, actually better. We want to increase what we're doing for these operators to get out. And the way we look at it is this. We've got to be successful in that mission, because the more successful we are in transitioning these special operations veterans out, the better things are going to be for them and their families. It's going to be good for business. And I am an advocate that the way we're going to solve veteran transition problems is veterans, right? We can't rely on anybody else to do it. We got lots of partners that are non-veterans to help us, but if we generally want to solve some of these issues that are out there, we've got to help each other be successful, because a veteran out there in the community in a senior position, is the best person to really be able to help with kind of veteran transition, veteran hiring, advocate for veterans. So we really want to make sure we're successful. That growth is like any organization, it's a challenge. We've been able to live up to it. We're expanding the organization. Again, we've got incredible support out there, making partnerships with organizations like you, so that we figure out where there's support out there. We don't have to build it. We just link into others that have it. And again, that helps us both kind of expand what we're doing and make sure that we're supporting it in the same way we have over the last, coming up on a decade here.
Yeah, and I hope we can be a great resource for you as well. And since we've been around since 2004, we've gone through that process, right? I mean, we've started out with the first 5, right? Or the first job placement, to where we just surpassed our 70,000th job placement. We hit 10,000 last year, which was a big stride for us in growth as well. But, as many as we can handle, right? So before we jump into the program a little bit, let's talk about the niche, because it's a very niche audience that you guys serve. Let's just recap for those out there listening, who that is specifically. It's the special operators, but can we run through, we're talking about the Green Berets, SEALs, the Delta Force. I don't want to leave anybody out. You know this better. We got Marine Corps special, Marine Corps guy, myself, special operations with Marine Corps. Who else is in that list, in that category?
Yep. So it's those folks that have been in the special operations community that have been through a selection and assessment. So you hit it. It's Army, Green Berets, the Special Forces, the Ranger Regiment, the Navy SEALs, the aviators from the Air Force and Army Special Operations community, the Marine Corps Raiders. We do support the community, the intelligence community. So those like case agents who have been out there. Again, it really comes down to that selection and assessment process. Because for us, that's really a differentiator for us in terms of the talent pool that we're working with out there. Again, it's niche. If we do get people that come to us that really don't fit that profile, we still always do an intake call with them.
Yeah.
Do exactly what you're doing. We
send them over our way, right?
We refer them to other organizations, and it's not an exclusionary kind of turning our nose up or anything like that. My team, as myself, I live up to what a great sergeant major told me once: is you always take care of soldiers, and you always have time for soldiers. So we bring everybody in on an intake call. We talk about transition. We counsel them on transition. And then we actually partner them if they're really not qualified for our program. We partner them with other organizations, and we make sure that's a positive handover to that organization. Because again, there's tons of resources out there, and what we're finding is a lot of veterans just don't know how to navigate the thousands of things out there. So we try to take that on a little bit and kind of act as air traffic control for everybody, whether it's internal to us or whomever come to us and ask for assistance and advice.
And that's true across the board for most charities in the space. It's, you have to triage, right? And it's not off because we focus on the employment piece, like you guys, it's not all about employment. There's a lot more that comes with that. If we really start unpacking that, everybody that comes in the door, we also, address that with them, because it's a conversation to be had about what's going on in life, where you at. There could be some other barriers to employment, right, that we have to uncover as well. We don't have to, but we tend to. It's just part of comes with the territory, right? So we do our part. Well, let's jump into the program. I appreciate you walking through the audience of who you serve specifically. Before we jump into the program, so I want to make the point, and unless this has changed from my research, you serve the transitioning component only and not the veteran, correct? Just because of the resources and time and availability?
So we put them through the transition program, and then we stay with them. So they join our alumni network. But veterans who have been out for a while coming to us, we don't have the capacity to support everybody who's already transitioned. So our focus right now is just on those in the process of transitioning. So kind of plugging the dike, if you would, in terms of that transition support to make sure those coming out have it. And, if capacity grows, we may change that. But right now it's mainly a capacity thing. So we stick to those active duty or transitioning.
Well, and that's where our types of partnerships come into play, right? You got us, you got the hire heroes out there, so we always like to, enjoy these types of partnerships, and that's where a lot of our referrals come in as well. But let's talk. Let's jump into the program. So I appreciate you walking us through the intros, the audience. Let's talk about the program opportunities a little bit. Can you unpack the 4 phases that we have in the programs?
Absolutely. So what we do with all our candidates is we bring them into our phase 1 assessment program. One of the things that's a little bit different is we don't try to replay some of the things that are taught in the transition assistance classes. And you can argue whether those are super effective classes or not. You know, we consider them the basic training, so we don't try to repeat those. What we're really trying to do in our program end to end is really help this veteran understand themselves, understand what their motivators are, what type of environment that may look like, help them narrow down what they may want to do based on kind of those motivators and environments, and then start to make connections through our network into these areas so they can explore these areas, right? So if it's technology, you know, what's it like to go be a project program manager in a technology company providing technology support, or maybe it's the medical field, or maybe it's be a consultant. So we help them meet connections that can have these conversations, mentorship, these business advice, career advice on these different areas, so they can start to narrow it down, and then ultimately help turn those networks into hiring networks or hiring opportunities, and then work with them through that hiring process in terms of, you know, really focusing down on the documents they have to produce, the resumes, preparing for interviews, helping them to understand compensation packages and providing negotiation advice on compensation packages, and then staying with them for a period up to a year to make sure they have a good transition and assimilation into and integration into the organization they just joined. So our phase 1 assessment is really helping those operators understand themselves. So part of it is helping them to understand what are the family situations, their financial situation, truly understand it. As you well know, that's a huge driver in a lot of the decisions out there. It also, you know, helps us understand that, hey, how stressful is this decision going to be made based on a financial situation? How much savings? How long can they go without as we're trying to find that right placement? You know, and then what's kind of the compensation level they're looking for, and it's not all about money. It's like, what's going to make you happy, what are your needs type thing. We also really work with them on what's the location you're going to go to, because it's, you know, in our opinion, it's one of the biggest drivers on your opportunities is where you put the pin on the map. Yep. And then we go into an executive coaching portion where we have them work their executive coaching staff to really start to understand themselves. And it's amazing that we've got 30-year operators who have been in special missions units who come out and say, like, wow, I really found out a lot about myself. And typical where you get the profile and you're like, that's not me. And I always tell people, well, ask your wife, show it to your wife and ask you if that's you, because it's important for them to really understand themselves, because it's a different understanding than they identify themselves as. For example, you know, you're a Marine, you identify yourself as a Marine, there's kind of norms and behaviors, even if, you know, you're Don, you're a guy, but you're also kind of a Marine and there's some drivers around you. But this kind of peels that away and it gets to the kind of core person underneath there. And it's like, how do you interact with others? How do they perceive you? What are your internal, external motivators? What type of environments you want to be in? And that starts to paint a picture of who this operator is. And then we can work with them to say, look, you know, here's you, and based on this, here's the type of environment you want to be in. Do not go to a big Fortune 500 corporate headquarters because it's going to be like working in the Pentagon. You probably need to find a small company. So we can use that to start to steer them towards the right environments, and also have discussions with, hey, do you want to build new things? Do you want to kind of maintain things and run, bring order to chaos? You know, do you want to go sell things? Do you like closing deals? You know, we've got a lot of folks that do Intel operations, and Intel operations are nothing but the ultimate sales job if you're running human sources, right? Trying to get this person to kind of give you information. So if you can close that deal, you can probably give you a pretty good salesman. And so we take these things and we help point people towards different functional areas and potentially different industries based on those attributes and skills they have. And ultimately what we want to do out of that is once they have that kind of direction, at least, and maybe it's a major compass heading, or, hey, you're kind of heading this way by 360-degree starburst, we can then start to really specifically start to translate those skills, attributes, and experiences. So, for example, if somebody says, hey, I want to be a project manager, you can start to extract all the things they've done that have been project management type orientation, or those other skills that, a project manager needs, and be very crisp in kind of how they describe themselves on paper, like a resume, but also how they pitch themselves, right? Because what we're trying to get them to understand is that all of this is about you being able to deliver a statement of value to others, right? And so that when you have a conversation with somebody, whether it's a networking session or you're writing in your interview, immediately people are seeing value. So it's this process of understanding, and it is exactly why we don't run classes like how to write a resume on the front end of this, because you can't write a good resume until you fully understand yourself and kind of direction you're going. So this is a process of discovery to get to, because when you come out of this, you're like, okay, here's what I think I want to do, and here's my value, right? Hey, I've been a platoon sergeant in the Marine Corps Raiders, and I've done all these things. I've built teams, I've done this, I've managed schedules, and they can talk about it, in relative to the function they want to go into.
Well, it's a mental mind shift. As a former life coach myself, I was doing life coaching with transitioning vets and injured vets specifically, because it is a mental mind shift, because we're so caught up in this image of who we are, whether it's an operator or as a Marine. Now I'm Don the civilian, and how does Don the civilian have to operate? I'm going to have to operate differently than I did inside of service to navigate the world, right? And that's part of the process. So it's great that you guys do more of a holistic approach to this, but that's very in-depth, right? That's a very in-depth process to go through with someone.
It is, and it's kind of why we have to constrain our population, just because really the resources and time at hand, being honest about it. But it's a process, honestly, that a lot of the veterans, if kind of they understood this process, can really do themselves and with some other assistance out there. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, once we get out of this phase one, they have an idea of the direction they think they may want to go. And it may be two things. Maybe I want to go into sales or project management, and they're still trying to decide.
But you started to narrow that down.
But right? You're narrowing it down, right? Because it's kind of like the Afghan death blossom, 360 degrees. I was one of those people coming out. It's like, I have no idea what I want to do, no idea where I want to live. I'm just going to fly.
It's a big world out there, right? Yeah.
Right. It's like rifle marksmanship. In order to hit a target, you need to start aiming towards a target, right? So you got to take it from this death blossom down to a very focused, you're pointing at a target, right? So coming out of that phase one, they have a value, they have a direction, and that's when we can start pairing them up with these career coaches and mentors. So when we say career coaches, somebody's working in this industry. For example, say somebody's like, hey, I want to go into finance and be a private wealth advisor. I think I want to do that, but I don't know much about it. So we can actually pair them up with people within our network that they know our organization, they know our veterans. We've worked with them to be good mentors and partners. When they have these discussions, it's a safe discussion, that they're starting to speak the same language. And when there's language gaps with the military, people like, hey, I was at OEF and I was a task force commander, on RC South, and they started to figure a little bit of that out, and they can be like, hey man, don't say that. Here's what you're part of this medium-sized business organization where, so they can start that process, but they can learn about this industry and this function, and then they can start doing course of action selection. Hey, that doesn't sound like I'm a good fit or whatever, and they can pivot. And we continue to have those conversations in this phase two exploratory phase until they're narrowed down into, hey, I really want to do this, and here's kind of the industry, and we've got a location area or a region at least. And then we can get really specific, and as they get closer to their transition timeline, we can help them flip those networks, if it already hasn't happened, into hiring networks, right? So, and if they're doing this correctly and they're working diligently, they've already got people interested in them. The other thing we incorporate is also the the DoD SkillBridge program. Right. So we build that into their timeline. So, hey, if this is your transition timeline, and we bring these folks into our program a year to 15 months out. That's our kind of our sweet spot. So we have them add that SkillBridge into their timeline. So they get to the point where they arrive at the end of their exploratory, hey, either they're ready to transition and go into this execution and get a job, or get their skill bridge, which ultimately we want to transition into a hiring opportunity, or at least refine what they want to do. That execution phase is really the shortest phase. That's that window of 90 to 120 days before they're actually getting out, when employers are really serious about hiring them.
But by this time, you've narrowed down the field, like you said, the geography, the interest, who they are as a person. So you can get very specific at this time, right?
That's right. That's right. So, hey, it's like, hey, I want to be in Nashville. I want to be in the medical industry. I want to be on the sales side. So that's when you can be really serious, right? That's when you're like, okay, we look at our network of folks and we have very deliberate conversations with, either hiring managers in those areas, or have them get networked in, or help them screen out opportunities they may find online or get referred to. And that's where we go into this preparatory phase, where now we can really crank down on their resume. And they've been building resumes. Everybody always asks for a resume when they're doing networking, but this is when it really counts, right? Like, now you can be laser focused on this. We can be laser focused on their pitch statements. We can help them with their interviews. We had one candidate, we helped him with 12 interviews. It's kind of a record for us. Did an interview after action review, helped them prepare for the next one. And the company was doing exactly what a good company does. They were making sure they get the right teammate into their organization. And they had panel interviews, individual interviews, case interviews. So he got the gamut of all those. But we were there to kind of help navigate that, right, and provide that.
It's a process, especially in this environment. And for those listening, today's July 8th, 2021. I mean, we're still post-COVID. There's a huge flux of people coming back into the workforce right now. They could be choosy, and these higher level paying jobs, they could be very choosy. And there's a lengthier hiring process to this right now. So it's part of what we're seeing.
It is. And we tell people to brace themselves that the hiring process, like once they're actively in, it's probably going to go 60 to 90 days for kind of these more senior, well-paying roles. So, and that goes back to why we're very adamant, like, what's your financial situation? Because what you don't want to do is be, hey, if I don't get this job and I don't have something 30 days after I retire or ETS, then I'm going to lose the house. So that forces people to do suboptimal things, make suboptimal choices, which has a life cascade, right? So we want to work with them to be prepared well in advance and, steel them for this period. But if they're doing it right, they're going to get the opportunity. The vast majority, 95% of our fellows within our program have an opportunity ready for them when they actually transition. And then that other 5% is really on the horizon. And then we've had a couple that, just because of where they're going, the location put on the map and what they're being very specific about, it doesn't manifest right at transition, but they've all been ready. Like, hey, I'm good for, 90, 120, 6 months, whatever it is, looking for that right opportunity because they're prepared for that. And every veteran can, if they start thinking about transition early. And that's what we really focus on overall. And then once they get an offer, and they're going to get an offer, we help them evaluate it, because service members, for 29 years, I never got to negotiate, my salary. So it's just a foreign concept. So we help them understand
right.
what compensation is, other incentives like 401ks or long-term incentives. We help them evaluate it, whether you're getting options in a company, like if it's a startup, because it's just unknown. And somebody may say, well, this is a $130,000 offer and this other one's 120. I'm going with 130, and they overlook that they're getting a percentage of the company that's non-divisible. And this company takes off, they could be millions of dollars in the future. So we'd had to have those discussions. But a lot of the time, it's just helping them navigate the base compensation and where they can negotiate back and forth on. So we help with that. And then after they transition again, we just touch base with them to make sure they're doing okay in their integration and assimilation. I'd say about 10% of our population has something that goes on after they actually join the company. We've had mergers and integrations happen. We've had the person that hired them, leaves the company or gets promoted or whatever it is. We've had job descriptions, what they get layered onto them once they join, which is pretty common. You're high performing, you get more stuff handed to you, but how do you have that conversation to go back and talk about that? So we help them navigate those post-transition conversations, and then they join our alumni network, and really we have our alumni come back and be mentors for those coming in the program.
Absolutely, yeah.
A lot of times you get, particularly with more senior veterans such as myself, you view yourself as a service member, right? 20, 25, 29 years, you view yourself as a service member, whether it's Army, Navy, whatever it is. And you can't envision yourself as a consultant at a big 5 consultant company, or, hey, I don't envision myself working for a major company like Amazon or UPS because I was a infantry sergeant, Sometimes it's just having somebody come back and say, no, you can do this too. And let me tell you why you can do it. Here's all the skills and attributes you picked up that you can use to join this or to use in this company and get this opportunity. The one thing we're very cautious about is, we tell people just because you're a veteran, nobody's going to hire you. They're going to thank you for your service, but don't expect them to hire you just because you're a veteran.
Right. Yeah.
You need to understand what value you bring to an organization, understand what your gaps are, highlight your value, and help communicate how you're going to close those gaps, because that's how you get people over their hurdle to hiring you, hiring managers to hire you. But we're very big on just because you're a veteran, nobody's going to hire you. On the other hand, we're also adamant with our corporate business partners that we don't want gratuitous veterans jobs, right? So and I know you've probably bumped into it as well. We get a lot of companies that have a ton of roles they really want to put in front of veterans, and the vast majority that I found in most companies are very much entry level, and which is great. But as I tell companies, you got a lot of different stratified layers of experience coming out of the military. So, you kind of, if you're going to hire veterans, how are you going to accommodate all those different experience levels? And so we cautious people, just don't, evaluate veterans programs, kind of
that's the range of people that we're seeing from the junior enlisted side. And it really depends, because with the special operators, they're more likely to have been in service for some length of time, right? Whereas you have your junior enlisted crowd that maybe done the 4-year term and they're out. This is the differences that we're talking to, and that they have different sets of challenges based upon the time that they're in, because they're going to be younger, less experienced, and they have different challenges in getting it. They're going to be finding those entry level jobs is where they're going to be entering the marketplace at, where the operators are probably going to have a great different skill set, and value to bring to a corporation that's going to put them in a different class of employment. And so that's part of that transition gap as well that we see happening.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've been in the service, like when I joined, I did my initial enlistment, I was relatively parallel, to an entry level job, probably a little bit more leadership and maturity. But, what we talk about is find something that's comparable to your experience level.
Right.
Just because you're a colonel in the Army doesn't mean they're going to hire you to be the CEO of a company. That's not what's going to happen. It's just, but by the same token, this sergeant major doesn't need to be sitting next to a 22-year-old who has 0 work experience and just graduated college, right? It's kind of value that level of experience. Veteran needs to know how to communicate that relative to that function, and then the business partners, we work with them to understand kind of the value and kind of levels of experience and skills and attributes at the different levels. And I think we've been really good with our partners on helping to navigate that. And again, it's a self-awareness on both sides, the veterans and the business. So at the end, it's the right placement for both, and that's a win-win when that happens.
And that's what's meaningful. We always try for meaningful career development, right? Now, if you need a job to get a job to pay bills right now, let's go out and get you that while we work on the career development aspect of that too. So, it depends on the circumstances that you find somebody with. But we oftentimes, like you're saying, spend a lot of time coaching the employers that we work with. We have thousands of employers that work with us here at Vet Jobs. I mean, it's encouraging them to create veteran resource groups because there is that assimilation process that you're talking about. And well, kudos to you guys, because this is one of the most in-depth employment programs out there. High touch. You guys are very high touch, and you go very deep and wide. So there's a lot of work that you guys are doing that you're not going to find a lot of other organizations going to that extent. And look at the cascading effect that you guys have, just the network effect of your alumni coming back to engage the audience exponentially. That's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. That's going to create more opportunities for your audience and the people that you're working with.
Absolutely. And, the one thing, like our board for the nonprofit, myself, is we want to get to the point where one day we can go away, right? Like it's like the typical special forces mission. Like if we're doing our job right, this goes away because we put senior leaders out there that can do this for us, right? They're in a position to really help with veterans hiring and helping to screen veterans. Because again, there's good and bad veterans out there. So just because you have the label of veteran doesn't make you, the best worker out there. But, we can get the right people out there to really kind of further this mission naturally.
Yes.
The statistics out there aren't in our favor at this time. If you actually look, like C-suite of Fortune 500 companies, it's a percentage of a percentage that have military experience at all, right? It's crazy low. And then you start talking about senior managers in most corporations, and it's single digit. It's like 1%. And then you start talking about veterans population in general. And I think the latest statistics from last year is it went up just because with the downsize, there's more veterans out there. I think it's in the neighborhood of 8 now, up from about 6.8, in previous years. So it's went up a little bit, but that's less than one in 10 people sitting out there as a veteran. So being able to relate like, oh, you're a chief petty officer. Okay, I can kind of understand that what you're doing at that level and kind of what it means to be successful in the military, or hey, you're a sergeant in the Marine Corps, what I mean? So there's just that background to be able to kind of understand a little bit. And again, just advocate for veterans causes through veterans resource groups or just direct hiring processes. So one day we hope to get there, and all organizations like ours can kind of go away. Definitely future aspiration. But I think we can get our operator population there sooner than nationwide. But we really aspire to be the ideal of kind of how we transition veterans. Just holistically get folks out there and kind of get them integrated into a new career, just not a job, but a new career.
Yeah, and that's the big point, that big conversation we have is, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? At this point, and we all have to go through that at some point, right? The reality of it's a long road. We have a long life ahead of us, we hope, and it's all about the journey, right? And so we always hope to facilitate that growth. And you're going to see it too. Someday you guys are going to go to the point where you're going to have people coming back in the program again because they're moving on up in the career development process. And so I look forward to seeing that growth for you guys. Now, before we do a quick wrap here, I appreciate you walking through the phases. And again, hats off to you guys, because this is one of the most in-depth and high-touch programs I've seen out there in the space. But I got to ask you a personal question. So as an alumni yourself, why come back to the foundation? You had a nice job over at Truist. You must love what you're doing over there, but why come back in and work at the foundation level?
Yeah, it really comes down to, I went through this program in 2015-16. So when it was Your Grateful Nation, helped me make that positive transition. And the previous executive director had wanted to move on to work on a business that he had developed and was growing. And it really provided me the opportunity to come back and give back to the organization and bring that knowledge from my own personal transition and working at SunTrust Bank and Truist Bank and working with the veterans team there and the very robust veterans network here in the Atlanta market, and bring that into our organization to really help chart our future to sustain the growth. So there's really an opportunity to kind of come back and give back to the team. And I think, like a lot of operators, even though we're ready to move on to another phase of life, it's that phase of life of being in the military is over, but it's kind of giving back to this family that's, the special operations community that I came from and lived in for so long. So it's awesome. Every week we get to see folks placed and just see the energy that they have in getting this great career again. Somebody has never thought they could go be working a Big Five consultant. Next thing you know, they've got an opportunity at a Big Five consultant, and to see that excitement. And then a year later to, talk to them and talk to their hiring manager, and they're like, "Oh, this individual is doing great." So it's kind of being back around service members again, but differently if you get down to it.
It's life changing, and it's phenomenal to see that impact that you have on somebody's life, from a personal level, because it's part of the camaraderie of being around and being involved and being of help and of service, right?
Absolutely. And you start talking about some of the veterans things out there, like, the suicide thing that everybody's thinking about, but a lot of the veteran kind of depression. I think there's a couple things to it, right? It's being disconnected from this kind of purpose and passion, whether you like being in the military or not. There's so much about the Army I did not like, standing in line, formations. I didn't like that, but I liked being around people that, they weren't of blood, but they were my family. I liked the higher purpose of the organization. I think being disconnected from that is a huge driver. And the other one is being valued, right? And feeling that they're valued when they transition. And if they're underemployed, I think, that's where a lot of that depression comes from. So if we can cure the underemployment, right, make sure that they know that there's this team and family still out there, and they can find, even if it's not connected back to veterans, find another purpose and passion and get connected. So the combination of, that kind of purpose and fulfillment in their employment, finding, a future purpose in whatever it is, whether it's community related or doing something like I did, which is kind of give back, it fills the cup, right? And it kind of helps maybe not eliminate, but definitely get rid of some of those drivers that I think drives to a lot of the behaviors we see in the veteran community.
Yeah, it's tremendous, and tremendous work that you guys are doing at the Special Operators Transition Foundation. And I just want to, again, thank you for coming on here. Now, to wrap up, can you tell the audience where they can go to sign up for services?
Yeah, if you're a member, just go to our website. It's shown there on the screen, www.sotf.org, and read about our organization and click the tab process, and that's where you can sign up for the actual services of the program. And if you're out there and you want to just support our mission, whether it's be a mentor, if you're a business that's interested in hiring, we have the link up there as well. And if you want to donate so we can continue to run this organization, it's also on there. So anything you do to, again, help make a positive transition, it's right there on the website. So.
Well, we look forward to working with you guys, watching your growth over the years to come, and just being another resource for you guys as well. Tommy Stoner, everybody. Tommy, congratulations on the 29-year career, your truest, and your transition yourself back into the foundation. I'm happy to see you land over here and doing some great work. So,
thanks, Don.
Thank you.